I'm already anticipating some of the things I'm going to comment on because a number of things Linda said is already kind of percolating in my head. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of concepts from social psychology. They're old concepts. They were first presented, to the best of my knowledge, in the mid 50s by a couple of psychologists named Morton Deutsch and Harold Gerard. But I think they're helpful for understanding the present political atmosphere. At its core, their argument was that all of the different forms of social influence, so those contexts in which people adjust their behavior or their beliefs due to the presence of other people, all of those can be traced back to two basic motives. One is called informational influence, and the other one is called normative influence. I've always found this distinction to be particularly helpful in trying to make sense of the reasons for why people behave as they do. And I think it's particularly helpful for this topic. So first, informational influence. One motive for adjusting our thoughts or behaviors in response to others is a basic desire to be accurate, to be correct in our beliefs. Generally speaking, people want their beliefs to be correct. Even people we strongly disagree with want their beliefs to be rational, based in reality, and accurate and wise. To the extent that we rely upon other people to provide such information, we will use their opinions, beliefs, and behaviors to make a judgment about what we believe to be correct, accurate, rational, or wise. It might take the form of a particular person who we believe to have more expertise than us. You know, could be a teacher. It might take the form of a crowd. If our judgment is that the crowd is wise, or it may just be someone who sounds very confident. We assume that they know more than we do. All of these sources, whether they are in physical groups, virtual groups, or just one other person that we might be conversing with at the bar, may provide us with information or answers to problems that we believe to be credible, and we may then adjust our own opinions accordingly in pursuit of accuracy. We use other people's takes to make judgments about a variety of things, including who to vote for, what restaurant to patronize, which car to buy, which doctor to visit, or how to negotiate a better salary. All of these decisions, if we were to make them only on the basis of our own individual original research, they would take forever to make. If we are highly motivated and have the capacity to do so, we may well do some of our own research, but this takes a lot of time. In many ways, you simply cannot escape informational influence. And in many domains, that's just fine and even desirable given our time constraints. But as a number of scholars have pointed out, the degree to which others' influence can lead us to make more rational, accurate conclusions depends in part on getting exposed to individuals with diverse information. That information that is useful, reliable, and presents novel arguments that are distinct from our own. Ideally, we can then integrate those novel arguments into our own to make a wiser decision. Legal scholar Cass Sunstein makes an argument very similar to this in his book, Why Societies Need Dissent, noting that in its best form, democracies and their citizens' representatives, coming from different experiences, bring different sources of information to the table. And through reasoned debate, wiser conclusions and opinions can emerge. Some dissenting voices at the table may dissent because they have information that the majority simply doesn't possess. And such information can be critical in moderating other people's opinions. To be clear, a precondition for the so-called wisdom of the crowd is that these different voices are somewhat independent of each other, bringing slightly different voices and, importantly, novel information to the discussion. Those voices are not playing off of one another, but rather are complementing each other. Unfortunately, now it is exceedingly easy to get information or arguments that are only consistent with one's own pre-existing opinions. In many cases, a person can effortlessly avoid potential disagreement with others, all the way up until their own opinion is permanently hardened. In fact, search engine algorithms and social media feeds are designed to do just that, reinforce what we're already interested in and find affirming rather than presenting what may be informing. The second motive, normative influence, that Deutsch and Gerard point out, they argue that We sometimes adjust our behavior or opinions because we want to be liked or accepted, or at least avoid being scorned and ridiculed. This motive can accompany the informational motive to be accurate, or it can occur relatively independently of it. The effects of normative influence can be felt in relatively inconsequential domains, as changing trends in hairstyles or clothing would seem to be driven more by a desire to fit in or be admired than any desire to be correct or accurate. But in the political domain, particularly when it comes to elections, in many ways, candidates are seeking to change their messaging or behavior in response to normative influence. In the end, winning an election is very much about being liked by others, at least more than the other candidates, and what a candidate is willing to do to get that approval, particularly on election day. This is certainly not a new phenomenon or a novel observation on my part. What may have changed substantially in the past decade is the power with which normative influence can be wielded by citizens, not just towards those running for public office, but towards each other. As social psychologist Jonathan Haidt and his co-author Tobias Rose Stockwell argued in their article, The Dark Psychology of Social Networks, this is in 2019 in The Atlantic, the ease with which members of the online crowd can instantly express their approval or disapproval on a wide scale means that people's opinions, no matter how carefully or thoughtfully proposed or even tentatively proposed, can be quickly held up for intense scorn or praise. This problem is exacerbated when an online critic can instantly raise his or her likability and status among a virtual audience by effortlessly expressing intense dislike for someone else without actually ever having to get close to the target of their scorn, and without ever actually having to present an argument either. Simple outrage will do, as Haidt and Stockwell note. One final note. The degree to which people rely on social forces to guide them, the degree to which they use others as signals for what is considered accurate or wise, the informational concern, or what is considered admirable or detestable, normative, that can vary. People who feel they are overwhelmed, uncertain, fatigued, or simply don't have access to what they would regard as reliable information are more likely to rely upon the behavior or opinions of others as a guide for what to believe or what to admire. This is worth keeping in mind when we disagree, perhaps even justifiably, with those who follow a political leader we would not. The capacity for a confident voice in the form of a political leader or an internet crowd to provide an audience with apparent answers and apparent approval is very powerful. This may be particularly true in an environment where there's potentially always a voice, using our own online presence as a conduit, reaching out to provide us with supposed solutions, as well as virtual crowds willing to instantly applaud our opinions or to instantly condemn them. There are a few recommendations that, and perhaps I'll hold off on these, that were mentioned by Haidt and Stockwell, and perhaps some policy considerations that might help address some of these concerns, but perhaps we can get into that with some of the discussion. So I'll pause it there. Okay, thank you.